Hi to everyone. Thanks to Citizen Voice and Actions Rwanda for the invitation to this year's Youth Policy Dialogue. Let me tell you all that I was a youth leader many years ago. I was part of the student movement in Colombia, and also I was supporting the youth movement that at that time was pushing for an update of the youth law in the country. I helped to create a youth-led organization that is called OCASA and works in promoting youth leadership with a focus on anti-corruption and transparency, as well as on political participation and peace. I led OCASA for several years, and I stepped out when I stopped to be young, which is something I really recommend for youth-led organizations. I'm telling you this because I want you to know that I have been right there where you are, trying to make adults to see youth activists in all its power, trying to make the system to understand that youth don't want to be considered the future, but want to be included in the present. I know about your fights, your struggles, your frustration, and also your joy and passion. And I truly, truly honor your work. Now, I was invited to talk about civic space in Africa and what can be done to the backslide in civic space. In his last report, my predecessor, Clement Wool, whom maybe you know, presented a list of the most problematic trends and challenges for civil society and civic space in the world. The first one was the decline of democracy worldwide, heavily marked by the growing authoritarianism and the increase of armed conflict. The second one was the spread of hostile narratives and anti-rights agendas that in many countries take forms of are pushed by the adoption of restrictive laws and regulations against collective citizen action, including the association and work of civil society, and also the use of protest as a tool to express discontent. And fourth, the growing restrictions in the electoral process, which is even more important in this year that was, as you know, labeled as the super electoral year. And we can see that all these situations are happening in Africa right now also. I was yesterday reviewing the last report by Civicus Monitor that was released last week that is called Peoples Under Attack. The report identified that from the 1st of November 2023 to the 31st of October 2024, over 2,500 incidents worldwide where civic freedoms were violated were reported. From those, 55% are related to the freedom of assembly and of association, and 45% to the freedom of expression. According to the report, only 20% of the countries and territories studied have a widespread respect for civil freedoms. Meanwhile, 72% of the global population lives with serious repression of civil freedoms, and accounting for an additional 1.5% since the last report. This means that the trend is increasingly rapidly. And almost 30% of the people live in countries where civic space is completely closed. 4 of the 9 countries that decline in the ranking are African, but also 2 with improvements are also from the continent, Liberia and Botswana. According to the report, in Africa, the top 5 violations were detentions and attack of journalists, detentions of human rights defenders, especially those working in democracy, labor, and environmental issues, the detention of protesters, and censorship. From the basic trends found in the report, I can say some things for you to discuss. First, the detention of protesters was a common tactic used to disperse or prevent protests, which has been documented in at least 76 countries. And protests more affected were the environmental mobilizations and also included restrictions in Ghana, Uganda, and Madagascar, pro-Palestine solidarity movement, opposition protests ahead or after elections, and protests to criticize government actions and policies, including restrictions in Burundi, Rwanda, Zimbabwe, and Ethiopia, and also anti-corruption protests. Mass detention as a response of youth-led protest movement mobilized against the high cost of living was common in several African countries, including Ghana, Kenya, and Nigeria. So we see a rising on the use of protest and the restriction of the use of protest. The second one is the disruption of protest that was documented in at least 53 countries, and in at least 40 of them, the excessive use of force was present. Protesters were killed in several countries, including Guinea, Kenya, and Nigeria. The third one was attacks of the work of human rights defenders, including unionists, detentions, prosecution, and killings of them, and against journalists, including in Liberia and the Democratic Republic of Congo. But what to do related to that complex situation? Let me highlight some possible initiatives that can perhaps spark your inspiration and your dialogue there. There are several developments related to the setting of standards for human rights protections through the work of the mandate holders, as me, and that other UN experts and mechanisms, including also regional human rights bodies and regional courts, as well as dedicated monitoring, litigation, and advocacy of civil society. And thanks to all these people, the global normative framework and standards protecting these rights have been strengthened and expanded. It is therefore important for you to study and learn from these standards to demand compliance in your countries. For example, there are several documents, including General Comment 37, the UN guidelines for the use of less lethal weapons, and the Model Protocol for law enforcers in the context of protest, that can be used to protect the right to protest and peaceful assemblies. So this is an invitation for you to study and use those tools that are there actually for you. Also, several actions are being done from different groups of actors in relation to the adoption of restrictive laws of the human rights violations. Against these actions. For example, I have led communications to your governments, and you can use them for your internal advocacy actions. I wrote to Rwanda, to Zambia, to Togo, to Mali, to Zimbabwe. Also, since May, when I took the mandate, I have joined more than 20 communications with your governments led by other special rapporteurs, but also accounting for the impact of human rights violations or the restrictions through law. So please use them. The third one is the understanding your value and your power. The rise in powerful social movements, despite all these threats, it's very inspiring. Social movements are becoming increasingly active on local, regional, and global level, finding innovative ways to mobilize and evade legal and other restrictions posed by states. Grassroots movements to defend rights have been formed in many countries and strengthened in many countries, many led by women, indigenous people, and by youth. The proliferation of social movements around the world is a positive indicator or a wide and active base in support of human rights and freedoms, but also the restriction of these movements are also a recognizing of the power of this movement. The rise in these collective actions is no doubt the biggest source of inspirations. And there are several examples on how these actions are ensuring the guarantee of rights, but pushing for the sustainability of the environmental agenda. And then the more inspiring movements are the women movement that are advancing in the recognition and guarantee of the sexual and reproductive rights. Also the sexual diversity movement that is advancing in the despenalization of homosexuality. Also the environmental and indigenous movement that are taking the lead in the protection of sacred resources, including water, food, and the oceans. And the strong youth movement that is happening around the globe using different agendas, but also in recent months, the movement that is standing in solidarity with the Palestinian people. So we need to learn, and you need to learn from yourselves and all these experiences. Regarding stigmatization, I invite you all to read the report I presented to the General Assembly in October. The last part of the report is especially important because it has a set of examples that can be used as a source of inspiration, and also it includes recommendations that can be useful for you. And then let me highlight some. So the first thing regarding counter narratives is developing narratives promoting messages to reinvigorate public support for democracy and human rights, and several actions seeking to bolster popular support for democracy and human rights and counter narratives of authoritarianism are actually increasing in the world, as well as new paths for engaging in public debates and communicating about human rights. In this, human rights defenders, activists, and movements need to connect better with the regular citizens to bolster also support to the defense of human rights and of civil society as a whole. Some of the initiatives seek to develop narratives to combat stigmatization with messages of hope, which is what I really want to inspire to you. This also allows citizens to regain support of democracy and human rights and fight the fear that many people is putting out there. These aim to change the narratives that polarize society and create the perception that civil society and activists are the enemy, which is not true, and we know that, but they perhaps not. In order to end the stigmatization that has led to criminalization and violence against activists, solidarity initiatives that shed light on the personal stories of those who have been arrested, persecuted, or killed for exercise the freedom and who demand their immediate release and justice are very important. Also important are to awards, tributes, or other forms to public recognition of the work of civil society activists and human rights defenders. And it's other way also to promote their value and to protect them. This helps to counteract the stigmatization of activists that says that they are undesirable, suspicious, or criminals, only for exercising the freedoms and rights. Other one is the awareness rising through documentation, and this is very important. We need to collect information to help us to measure the existence and impact of harmful narratives, including information about the long-term chilling effect that these narratives have on the exercise of public freedoms and on other human rights, not only freedom of assembly and of association. This can allow the public and opinion makers to have a better understanding and enable more critical debate. Once again, I honor deeply your work. I hope you can organize, learn from each other, resist, and use the imagination to set new dreams and reach them with peaceful collective efforts. I'm there with you.